Hey there, everyone. My name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Sarah Kalmeta, she, her, founder and futurist, Pivot Point International Global Speaker, leadership alchemist, and someone who thinks chaos is just unorganized potential. This week, our conversation is about X marking a legal win, government jobs in Brazil getting a glow up, sensory joy on full display, and more. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Bernadette. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love that you're here, especially since you're going to talk to us a little bit about pivoting. And I think it's a great time to be having that conversation. But can you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Sarah the Pivoter. That's inspired by Rosie the Riveter. I started my business 5 years ago while living in Hong Kong. And all around me, it was the height of COVID, the very beginning of it, I should say. And people were not prepared for the pivot. And they couldn't even see it coming, even though it was staring them in the face. And so I was curious about this and I started to do research and I started to look at what are the different perspectives people hold and why are they not able to see what is common sense or what is right in front of them? And I realized that a lot of people have blinders on. We're very, very good at telling stories to ourselves and convincing
Mm,
ourselves of certain things. And we don't prepare for the smaller pivots. We're all accustomed
mm,
to, oh, I'm going to get a new job, I'm going to move, have a baby, someone's passed away, etc. But we're not preparing for those big moments by building the foundational skill sets that are really required to help
mm,
us navigate complex situations with grace and strength, right? It's
mm.
one way to stumble your way through something and like just get to the other side and go, whew, I made it. And it's
Yeah.
a completely other thing to do that with intention and be really aware of what's going on and know where you need to ask for help and what you're capable of. And are you even going in the way that you desire?
I love that. So, I think that we're kind of in this strange place again. There's not a pandemic, but there's definitely a lot of uncertainty for a wide variety of reasons. I think there are a lot of
Yes.
businesses being impacted right now, small and large. A lot of individuals seeing the effects of that. What is one thing an individual can do to prepare themselves or to take these smaller intentional actions to have that pivoting strength capacity?
Yeah, this is a great question and something I get asked a lot. And my answer is slow down,
Okay.
which is hard. The
Yeah.
world moves fast. I have a whole keynote around it. Why? Because I also need this advice.
Mm.
When we can get really still and really quiet, we can get more clarity for ourselves. And we can also learn to sit with uncomfortable emotions.
Mm.
Having emotional granularity is proven by science and positive psychology to make people happier. Even studying positive psychology will make you happier because you understand what is going on. And when you can understand your experience and you can recognize that this is temporary,
Yes.
Corey Muscara, a very well known meditation guide, is always known for saying, this moment, it's like this. And so when you can build that muscle and you have that foundation, even when things are going wrong and people around you are running around like headless chickens, and it seems like nothing is in order, this moment is like this, and I can get through this. Okay, what do I need in this moment? And then you can start to apply the right tools because what I see
Mm.
oftentimes is people applying a blanket tool of meditation or a blanket tool of exercise or a blanket tool of watching Netflix until it asks if you're still there.
Right.
And getting still and slowing down gives you the capability to be a lot more intentional, but also that you can get through the difficult experience because you're already experienced and practiced at that.
Mm. Well, and I think that there's a value in some ways to, just sort of watching Netflix until it asks if you're still there. But at the same time, I mean, that's just sort of, that's not stillness. It is in a way, but it's like brain clutter. It's not silence, right? And I
I
think there's a
wouldn't
difference,
call that, yeah, stillness. And physical it is, but not mental.
right?
And at the same time, okay, that's a limit, but it's a serve because if you don't yet have the capability, the skill set to process your own emotional experience, a
Hmm.
lot of people were not taught this by their parents. It wasn't healthily modeled at young ages.
Right.
They didn't learn it in school. It's a relatively new thing to be talking about in schools at young ages. Then that coping mechanism is what allowed you to get through something difficult or to like get not break down because of this intense emotional experience you're having. Is it something you want to keep doing forever? Likely not if you have other goals in your life. So,
Sure.
really learning how to, one, be with an emotion or a feeling that you're experiencing, noticing what's happening in your body, and two, name it.
Hmm.
Our friend Sean Flaherty likes to say, if you can name it, you can tame it, which is
Hmm.
very, very true. As soon as you know what something is, the fear of it goes away.
Yeah. That it all starts with a self awareness, which comes from the stillness, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, I mean that's certainly been a journey for me is learning all of those things, and it's always a work in progress. And I think right now we need to sort of give ourselves that grace and that space to figure it all out. Well,
Absolutely.
in this week's episode of, or in this week's newsletter, Five Things, I wrote a little bit about my own learning as a kid. My dad wouldn't let me have a lemonade stand because he thought that our neighbors would think that we needed money. So the messages I received were to be independent, to not ask for help, definitely not talk about personal problems. And those were things that I had to unlearn and to learn that actually we have deeper connections when we are more honest, when we are a little bit more real. But I think that it takes practice. I mean, that's a muscle we have to build. So I shared a little example of something that I've been practicing is when someone actually asks how I'm doing, answer them honestly. Not without oversharing. I mean, there's a there's got to be a limit, but answer them honestly and start with some low stakes environments to test this in. But I think it gives us the opportunity to practice building that muscle.
Absolutely. And I love that you use the word practice there because it is a muscle, right?
Hmm.
And it will feel a little awkward and clunky. You might feel the proverbial soreness afterwards, like, oh, did I do that right? Was that a bit weird?
Yeah,
And when you just embrace the weirdness, I mean, I live in Austin, so I definitely have, but it becomes easier with
sure.
time, right? And then the next thing you know, you're not even thinking about it. And it's just something that you are rather than something you're doing.
Hmm.
And so it takes time and starting small, right? Like you said, low stakes environments. You can just say, honestly, it's been hard. I've been up against it lately.
Hmm.
I think I'm coming through though. How are you? Right?
Exactly.
You don't have to give them the whole sob story or give a million details, but you can be honest. And then depending on that relationship, that connection, they may ask a follow-up question and that opens the door for connection. And you might
Exactly.
be surprised. You'll get oftentimes some insight that you weren't expecting.
That's true. And then other folks might share a little bit too, and it just deepens, right? But you've got to start somewhere, and someone's got to go first. So you might as well be you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's move into this week's good vibes. The first story this week comes from Omaha, where the Performing Arts Center is redefining accessibility with the Sound Shirt, a groundbreaking jacket that transforms sound into touch. So, this is wearable technology that allows deaf and hard of hearing individuals to feel the music in real time, matching different vibrations to instruments across the stage. This rolled out recently at a show called Interwoven. So, adaptive fashion and silent disco in this Interwoven show. I love it.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I mean, when I saw that, I actually thought, I want one because it would be such an experiential moment. And I have the headphones that go behind your ears and they vibrate the bone here, and so
Oh,
you're
never heard of
actually
those.
Yeah, it's actually how we receive sound is through the vibrations, right? And so
Mm,
that is where we're getting most of the sound, and then just a very tiny, faint actual auditory experience. So it gives you the situational awareness. You don't have something inside your ears.
mm,
But oftentimes, when I'm at a music festival or at a really great concert, my eyes are closed anyway. I'm just
mm-hmm.
feeling the music and dancing. So to be wearing something that would like vibrate to that music feels like it would just be an otherworldly experience. And then imagine the whole crowd had that as well. And you open your eyes and like you're seeing, I mean, that's what happens at certain events. Everyone's got to light up wristband or, they all go off at the same time and it always adds and people are in awe. So I think that not only as an accessibility feature is this amazing, but just as an experiential tool to get people to experience things in a new way is very powerful.
It is, and the idea originated with disabled communities, right? And like many of the ideas that come from folks like that, it's good for everyone, as you said. It's something that can really enhance everyone's experience and just be a transformative community experience, which is just creates memories.
Absolutely.
All right, the second story this week comes from Tulsa, where on the 104th anniversary of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, the city took a historic step forward by unveiling a $105 million Greenwood Trust aimed at generational repair. So, some of you may know that white mobs destroyed Tulsa's thriving black business district in 1921. And so this trust is about healing the economic and cultural scars. And the funds will support affordable housing, cultural preservation, legacy wealth building for the survivors' descendants. It will include publicly transferred property and community input. It's amazing, especially now, to see this stuff still coming forward.
Yes, it gives me a lot of hope. There's always going to be things going on in the world that are terrible, that seem like we're going backwards. I mean, no matter when you look at the news, whether it's today, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we have some patterns as humanity.
Yeah.
And yet, initiatives like this, they really bring people together, build community, and it helps us step into another's world and really understand. And that generational repair is so important because we don't see it unless we can go and experience it. And I just recently saw some photographs that were taken from an aerial view to show the wealth disparity in different places like South Africa,
Mm,
um, the UK and Brazil, and it's like literally a line, and then these big estates and lots of green and all of this space, and then on the other side, like shanty towns,
mm,
just across like the train tracks, if you
yeah.
will. And I mean, the studies also show when we work together and we have greater purpose and greater meaning, we are kinder, we are more happy, we get more things, done as a whole, we're more inspired and, inspiring people are simply inspired. So
Mm-hmm.
to this, it's like, this is very inspiring. And that now inspires me to go and do something that makes a difference or that can contribute in some small way, even if it's just to go and experience another's perspective and then bring that voice out to other people through a podcast
Mm-hmm.
or something else, right? Helping to bridge the gap.
Yeah, and imagine the ripple effect that this can have with those families who now have extra money to reinvest in their own communities, to inspire others, to invest in others, to build their own businesses or whatever the case may be. I mean, the ripple effect is huge,
Absolutely.
the economic impact. I mean, listen, a lot of these good vibes are about making more money for someone, right?
Right.
Because it does, that's at the end of the day part of the bottom line and how these things move forward. So it really has a profound ripple effect. And uh and I love that justice is served in some way.
And it's also great to see that the it doesn't condone what happened, but it is, making things right. Like
Yep.
let's level the playing field again. Let's acknowledge that that wasn't the right thing to do and, do what we can to make repairs. That goes a long way, and I think that is also something we can take into our own lives and find, you had a question there, which was audit how your city or company holds land and legacy. We can also do that with ourselves. Like, how do
Mm,
we, go back and rectify some of the things that we might have done or that our families might have done, and just make reparations and extend the olive branch, if you will.
yeah, absolutely. All right, the third story this week comes from Puerto Rico, where the Supreme Court ruled that non binary people can now list gender X on their birth certificates. So it already allows for gender changes um, more generally, but now it's birth certificates. And it joins 17 U.S. states, affirming the legal recognition of non binary identities is both possible and constitutionally required. This is important because it opens access to healthcare, housing, education, and safety. And what I love about this is that this is moving forward despite federal rollbacks of trans and non binary rights and protections, including the suspension of X markers on passports. So, Puerto Rico is moving forward. Other states are doing some cool things, and they're still doing it despite the current environment.
Yeah, that's powerful because that's a powerful stand to take. And it really goes to show, I mean, all people have a right to exist.
Right.
All people. And I saw something the other day that said pride is important because it means that someone isn't crying in the bathroom somewhere thinking that they're better off dead.
Yes.
And that is so true, And so it's really, again, you don't have to subscribe to that. You don't have to become that, but you can let other people exist. All we want as human beings is to be seen and heard. I can, every single people problem that exists is because someone didn't feel seen or heard. That's it.
Mm,
And they didn't communicate well. And then they're now reacting and they're living in a story. And then it goes on and on and on in this vicious circle. And
yep.
so when we see people and we hear them, that's all we ever ask. When you think about, like, why do you get offended when something happens, or why do you have an intense emotional reaction? It's because you feel marginalized, you didn't feel seen or heard or understood. And now there's an underlying fear that comes with that, because in the past it meant you were kicked out of the tribe and you wouldn't have resources. And so
That's
if that's
right.
what if you want that, everyone wants that. And so you can't get that for yourself unless you give it to others.
Yes, and I think that this scarcity mindset that so many of us were raised with, that sort of the sense that there's not enough, is a myth, right? And so we have to learn that just because someone else has a quality doesn't take anything away from you, right? And there's enough to go around. There's enough love to go around as well.
Yeah.
So yes,
I have a
beautifully
shirt.
said.
I have a shirt that says, equal rights for all does not mean less rights for you. It's not
Mm,
pie. And
exactly.
then my kind of like add on to that is, and even if it was, I can't eat a whole pie by myself. And if the pie is bigger, we all get more pie. So,
Exactly.
it's very much moving, again, unlearning that scarcity mindset.
Absolutely. Our the first story this week comes from Spokane, Washington, where the Shadle Park High School developed an adaptive field day event for over 200 special education students across the district. So the field day has a petting zoo, sensory tents, wheelchair basketball, superhero volunteers designed around neurodiverse needs. There's sensory friendly zones that allow students to stim, retreat, or engage however they feel best without judgment. Love this. And it was a community event. They had Parasport Spokane involved, the Velocity soccer team involved. Love this.
Yeah, this is fantastic. And it's really, I remember growing up and there was the short bus, right? And all these things that
Mm-hmm.
people would say. And yet you look at the world and the population, like 40% of people have ADHD, which just means it's a different way of the brain working. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
disorder. It is just the brain is operating differently, and that's okay. And so when we can encourage, especially children at young ages, to engage with the world in the way that they know how, then that can unlock things. I mean, who knows what they then go on to develop and later in life can bring to the table, right? And so it's important that we recognize that we nurture it, that we don't make it wrong. And there's a beautiful word the in New Zealand. The Maoris have. for someone with Down syndrome. I forget the word off the top of my head, but it basically means someone who operates in their own time and space.
Mm.
And it's such a beautiful description because that's exactly what's happening. And yet when we go into a flow state, or we go into some experience that we really resonate with, or a retreat or somewhere in nature, we do time and space act differently. We feel them differently. And so I think there's a lot to be learned from neurodiverse people, or as I like to say, neurospicy.
Hmm.
And so
Yep.
learning how to experience the world in a different way than what you experience day to day is powerful. And we can all learn to slow down, to play more, to view things from a different perspective. And that's a powerful thing. If the more people in the world did that, I think we would have a lot more good vibes to share.
Exactly. Well, and that just creates that space in particular allows these children to feel seen and heard, right? So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
back to your point from earlier. All right, the last story this week comes from Brazil, which expanded affirmative action, raising the quota for black candidates in federal jobs from 20 to 30%. It also added indigenous people and descendants of enslaved Afro Brazilians as eligible beneficiaries. So these changes apply all across government, including state run companies, with a review set for 10 years from now. So representation in top government jobs has increased 10% over the past decade, but black and mixed race Brazilians make up 55% of the population, but are vastly underrepresented in leadership and are overrepresented in below the poverty line. So it's coming. It's not allowed here anymore in the U.S., but Brazil has moved to increase affirmative action. Love it.
It's
It's
great.
important.
I love the line you have in the email too about representation must reflect the real population, not preserve the power structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel we're at a very critical time in history where that's what's happening. The traditional power structures are being challenged, and we also need structure. So it's this
Mm-hmm.
like dance this that we're going through, but the old ways are crumbling and dissolving and dissembling, and then we get to rebuild from that. And so I
Exactly.
I feel like I had a conversation this morning about if we can see people like us in positions that we want to be in, or in spaces that we want to be in, then we don't self-edit and take ourselves out, right? If we see them there, then we're like, oh, this is possible. And whether that's a conscious thought or not, that's exactly what happens. And
Yes.
so I think that's beautiful to have more representation of the people who actually live there. I mean, when I was living in Hong Kong, I was one of many expats. But one of my favorite mentors and good friends, Gary Dolsky, who's the CEO of Metrojet, and he used to always say, like, my job is to retire so that less people that look like me, and he was an old white man
Mm,
with white hair. He's like, less old white men with white hair are here in this job because it should
yeah.
be the local people in this job.
Love
And
it.
now there's enough training and exposure for that to happen. And I think that's a very powerful thing to do. Yes, we can go in and assist, but we don't need to be the saviors. We don't need to always be running things. We can help and do things together and be symbiotic, because at some point we might need that help back.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. Well, let's move into this week's Good Vibes to Go. I'll share my Good Vibe to Go and then invite you to share yours. So, I would recommend that you check out and subscribe to the weekly Queer News Podcast, a quote, Ambi award winning weekly news podcast where race and sexuality meet politics, culture, and entertainment, hosted by Anna Deshawn, who is a former guest on this show. Queer News Podcast. We'll put that link in the show notes. Sarah, what's your Good Vibe to Go?
Well, my good vibe to go is just the reminder that even if you tend to think that the glass is half empty, or if you think the glass is half full, it is always refillable. And
Mm.
you get to choose what you fill it back up with.
Oof. Mic drop right there. Good wisdom to end on. Thanks, Sarah. How can folks get in touch with you?
Great question. They can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can Google Sarah the Pivoter or Sarah Kalmeta and go to sarahkalmeta.com. You can find my podcast and learn more about what I do and who I am. And I would love to talk to you.
All right, we will make sure that gets put in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for being a guest. This has been a really fun show, and appreciate you being here.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a great week.